So whoever wants to start,
No, it's girls.
you're,
Okay.
oh, there you go.
Yeah,
That's the rule.
thanks for having me. It's good to see you all. This is kind of a homecoming. The last time I was in this classroom was in 1983. And I did my student teaching in this classroom
We'll put it this
For
way.
Mr.
Wow.
Heem
I wasn't teaching.
years
I
ago.
didn't know that.
So, yeah, it's been a little while, but
Does it look pretty much the same?
yeah.
Yeah.
It does, but it's all good.
Yeah.
So, I'm Dale Undum. I'm out at Barnes County North. I teach all the high school science courses out there from ninth grade on up. My journey began, as many people do, going to college and undecided on what you want to do. So I started taking my generals down here at Valley City State, and one of them was a class in biology, and my professor was actually from my same hometown, Archie Moore, out there. So I had a connection there, and I enjoyed biology. I'm a farm kid, so I was always outside hunting, fishing, growing plants, farming, and the farming aspect wasn't going to work out, so I needed to pick something to do for my life. So I fell into teaching. I got into teaching. And then 4 years, you finish your degree, you take your required courses. Back in those days, you had to have so many credits in chemistry to teach and biology. I ended up coming out of college with a Bachelor of Science degree in education. I majored in biology, I minored in mathematics. And I started my teaching career up at a small little German community by Minot, Karlsruhe. I didn't actually even apply for the job. The superintendent, it was a smaller school, got the graduating list from the local universities and just gave me a call out of the blue, asked if I'd come up for an interview. I went up and interviewed, and as I left the interview, they offered me the position. And I accepted right away. So that was a great teaching experience. It was a smaller Class B school, great community to live in and to teach in. I spent 5 years there, and then a position opened up at Maddock, North Dakota. I knew a teacher from there involved with science fairs, and I spent 1 year there. And then my high school teacher retired out at North Central of Barnes. So that position opened up. So it was a chance to move back here and teach and get back to my old hunting and fishing areas and all that kind of thing. So luckily I got in there and spent 28 years there. And then I retired. I taught I needed 32 years to retire. I taught for 34, and I really thought I needed a break. And I did. So I retired from teaching. I had my years in. I spent 4 years doing other things, and then that teaching position, which I didn't expect to opened up again. And I felt rested and ready to go again. So I never would have thought it would have happened. So they offered me the position back. So I'm back at my old teaching job, exactly the same as before, after a 4-year hiatus, and loving it. I have 5 preps this year. I start off with anatomy, physiology. The smaller schools usually have some smaller classes, so I have 5 kids in there. Second hour, I have a dozen chemistry kids. Third hour, I have 17 sophomores in biology. And then I have environmental science, a class of 6 kids. And then I have 2 split courses of physical science in the afternoon. So it's a busy day, but the biggest thing that you learn in this profession, I think, is your preparation. When you're prepared for your classes, then things generally go smooth. So that's my biggest key that I would give you as you enter education, to be prepared. And it takes time to be prepared. You go into the first year and, going in front of a class and you're in position, you have to teach the class. So you do your best to prepare. Is everything going to go smoothly? Probably not. But you learn year by year what you're going to keep and what you're going to change, and it's a process. So you get better. Every year you teach, you get better. I was fortunate to be able to teach with my high school teacher, math teacher, Al Schumacher. I think we have a connection in the classroom. He was my high school teacher, and then I got to go back and teach with him, which was awesome. So I think the math department out there was just like second to none. It was awesome because of his experience. So when you see your grandpa, All thumbs up, so, that's my background. Oh, I'm married, 4 kids, 3 grandkids, and the 4th one's on the way in May, so we're pretty excited. So, thank you.
Just my background.
Perfect timing, yes.
Your journey into education.
Journey into education, well, physics kids know this, but my journey into education is I took biology in this classroom. I took,
Sense of theme.
I took chemistry in the classroom I'm teaching in, and when I was a junior in high school, I took chemistry and physics the same year, and then when I was a senior in high school, I'm like, biology is stupid, I'm not taking advanced biology, and there's no more sciences to take, so my parents and I worked with the school, and they let me go down to the college, and I took general chemistry, so it's chemistry 121, as a senior in high school, and I really enjoyed it, but Dr. Stickler put me in charge of the study group with college science majors. So I'm a high school senior, like leading the study group, and I loved that more than I loved anything else. Like more than I loved playing tennis, more than I loved music, more than I loved whatever else I was doing. I loved that the most, and at that point, I decided I was gonna become a high school chemistry teacher, and I asked Dr. Stickler, I go, are you gonna retire before I graduate? And he said, nope, and that was my reason why I chose VCSU over somewhere else. If Dr. Stickler goes, I'm retiring this year, I probably would not even stay at VCSU, but since he was gonna be there, I stayed at VCSU, knew what I was gonna do, started up my classes, and got in my education courses, and then on Martin Luther King Day 2003, that's when I got the call up to go to Iraq. And I took a year and a half off to go to Iraq, and when I came back, I was an absolute, like I came back and I was like, all these kids are so immature, all these kids are, man, they don't even understand the world. And what I did when I came back was I just powered through, and I'm like, give me a classroom because I can teach around all these kids. Like these, I'm better than everybody. I was a conceited jerk, and so I didn't learn anything my last semester and a half, or actually I say year and a half. I didn't learn anything because I just thought I was better than that. I still got A's in all my courses, so I mean, I checked all the boxes, got my A's, but I didn't learn anything. I didn't develop at all as a person or as a teacher during my last year and a half of college. And then I got in the classroom, so how I got to this position, and like I've talked to you guys about keystone moments, and like a keystone moment with my wife was I emailed her and said, if you need to break up with me because I was in Iraq, if you need to break up with me and move on with your life, I'm fine with that. That would have been a keystone moment. If she would have said, yep, I'm breaking up with you, how would my life be different today? I wouldn't have Kaylee, Sky, and Lane, I wouldn't have my wife, who knows if I'd be here, right? So there's a keystone moment. But another keystone moment was, I was applied for this job here, and they offered it to somebody from Carrington. So imagine if that person from Carrington would have taken this job. Like, you would have a different chemistry teacher. I probably wouldn't be teaching here, I'd be somewhere else and not here. So I mean, just thinking about how your life could change based on one small thing. But and if I wouldn't have got this position, do you guys know where Barrow, Alaska is? It is on the Arctic Ocean, right on the northern part of Alaska, that I went to a career fair and they offered me $55,000 to teach there. And I go, well, what about my wife? And they go, what does she do? And I go, well, she's an RN. We need a school nurse. We'll pay her $55,000 a year also. You know what I signed my first contract here for? $24,000 was my first contract here. So if Valley wouldn't have hired me, my wife and I might have been in Alaska for at least a year, because they were gonna take care of our housing and our food, and $110 grand for the two of us. So I mean, like, just crazy to think about how your life can be different. So anyway, back to education, got in, I was content, and you did the stuff in my class because you were scared of me. And kids hated me, and when I was not around, like, yep, I was the teacher they bashed because I was just a jerk, because I was just content, and it wasn't until a student came in after school one time and went, I go, hey, you're done with your stuff, get out of here. And she just hung her head and said, I don't wanna go home. And that was like the first time it hit me that, oh, not every student has two loving parents and a safe home and have food and have all their needs are met socially, emotionally, physically, food, shelter. Like, I thought everybody was more like me, where everything was always taken care of all the time. And I didn't see, like, I thought kids, if you didn't do your stuff, it's because you were unmotivated, or you were just, you were a slacker, was the reason you couldn't get something. Not, I didn't think of anything outside the classroom for the first few years. Once that hit, I started changing. And then I started looking at how I assess and how I did things, and how did I teach and how did I assess? The same way, back then it was the same way that my teachers did. I didn't have a rhyme or reason behind it. I just was like, oh, this is how they taught, and this is, like, they just had tests and they put in the grade book, and then I didn't think anything about grading and assessing. I just was like, all right, I got done with chapter 1, so here's your guys' test. Oh, you guys suck at chapter 1. We're still moving on to chapter 2. Like, no reflection, no like, what do the kids need, no backwards planning. That's the way I did it. And Al Olson at the college, you guys know, did Al Olson come in for a time? Dr. Al Olson runs the education department at VCSU. He's talking to me about, hey Matt, what could we do better for education? And I told him, I was like, flat out, I mean, we should do more on assessment, more on teaching practice, like methodology and how you develop your teaching stuff. And he goes, look at your transcript. We have classes on it, and I looked at when I took them, I have no recollection of taking those classes. Even though I have an A in them, I was so checked out that I didn't learn anything. So I had to do everything the hard way when I learned about my practices. So I had to learn through experience, I had to learn through my own development, reading Marzano, going to PLC conferences, and at our PLC conference, so you guys know my standards-based grading system, right? It's the way I operate with that and how I retakes. That was based off a 1-hour lesson, because it was Tim Brown was the guy who did it, and Tim Brown came in and he explained it a little bit, but then he goes, what would you do if a doctor cut up one eye and they get an eye patch for 6 weeks? In 6 weeks, they cut up the other eye and have an eye patch for 6 weeks, and then after 12 weeks, you can now see perfectly. And someone goes, does that kind of sounds like LASIK? They can do that in a day. So yeah, so what would you do? Well, we'd sue for malpractice. Yes. So if you think of it that way, most teachers are doing the same things they've done for the last 50 years. So aren't we committing educational malpractice by just continuing to do things the way we're doing, rather than following research-backed best practices? Why aren't we doing that? And if we're not doing that, and we call ourselves professionals, you're committing educational malpractice. So that really hit me, and that's what really got me to switch from just being a traditional teacher into more of a standards-based teacher and understanding by design teacher, backwards planning. That's what hit me, and then I did that. I think that helped out a lot of motivation. Then I hit a lot more with SEL and relationships, and did a lot of reading on that, and realized that was more important. And I think that's probably where I am right now, is where got the teaching and assessing, got the relationship side, and it only took me 18 years to get here. Did you already go?
I did not. Well, I did not learn in this classroom. I was a Packer. Yes, I was the enemy, you guys. So I started at West Fargo. Mine kind of is a little bit different than most students. I did not at first really want to be a teacher. I was a CD student. I remember sitting in my principal's office, basically being told that I am not going to pass. I might as well just drop out and go find a job somewhere. Okay, that's how it kind of started. And if you guys don't know me, I am very if you tell me that I can't do something, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I had a really, really good, 2 amazing teachers that kind of pushed me and helped me pass high school. And one was my art teacher, Mrs. Brenda Luthi. She still teaches at West Fargo. She's now on Mustang now, so. And then Nancy Dowen, and she was a math teacher. And I absolutely hated math class. I hated math class, but I was in her class very, very often. getting assistance so that I could pass high school. And the cool part is she actually won Teacher of the Year, both of them did, a few years ago, which is really cool, because they definitely deserved it. So I passed high school, but the biggest thing for me, I was bullied in high school. I just did not want to be there. That was not the place that I was going to start out. That wasn't the place that I was gonna have a career. Between getting shoved in lockers and getting my clothes stolen in the girls' bathroom and whatnot. So school was not for me. Like, that's not where I wanted to be. Then I decided that I was going to continue to prove that principal wrong, and I was going to go to a 4-year school. And I had to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, and I really loved geology. That was going to be where I was going to go. I had a partial full ride, close in between 3/4 ride to the University of Montana, to go to geology school. And I got there, I toured, and I just wasn't quite happy with kind of that area, that scene. My mom decided that, because I'm not a very good driver, so she said, okay, you can go, you can do it, like if that's where you want to go for it, but you have to drive back in the winter time on your own. And if you've ever driven in Montana, in the wintertime, it is super, super, super scary because you could fall off a cliff. So I decided I wasn't gonna go there, and I was kind of contemplating kind of life at that point. It was getting close to the time that school was gonna start again, and I decided that I was going to go to VCSU, and I was like, well, I'm gonna continue to prove that principal wrong, and I'm going to become a teacher. I wanted to be someone that cared for their students, just like those 2 teachers did for me, staying after school, coming before school, being basically like that second parent like those teachers were for me. I could go to them for anything. My mom was pretty much a single parent. My dad was a truck driver, so he was gone a lot, so she was kind of like my second mom. I would stay and have snacks with them. I'd help her hang up artwork all around the school, so I just kind of wanted to be that figure that I didn't have a lot of. If she wasn't in school, I probably would have dropped out. So I wanted to be that person for students that I knew down the line were gonna be, like me. So I decided that I was gonna go into education, specifically teaching art, because that was one of my passions. So I went through VCSU, met my husband my freshman year, and we were together forever since, and did my art shows, things like that. And then it's really, really hard to find an art education job. Typically, you would dual major, so you would major in art and English, or art and science, or art and something else, because especially if you want to stay in North Dakota, either the schools don't have an art teacher, or they go between tons of different schools. Like, you might be teaching at, like, let's say, a Maple Valley, a VCSU, and lots of different.
And that's what Amanda Starr is.
Yep. So you're kind of floating around between multiple schools, or you're teaching dual classes. So you're going to teach art for 2 periods of the day, and then you're going to go teach English for whatever. So I was kind of looking around for what I could do. My husband already had a job, a really nice job in Jamestown. So I'm like, so he gave me a 30-mile radius, which in North Dakota, it's very challenging to find a job in a 30-mile radius of Jamestown. So my first year out of college, I was a full-time substitute, and then I was also a para for an autistic student in a school in Jamestown. Which I would say, out of all of the things throughout this will be my 10th year in teaching, that first kind of, and I classify substitute teaching as teaching, I mean it is. That is where I found my biggest classroom management, working with colleagues, and kind of coming into a classroom not knowing, procedures, things like that. You're kind of just thrown in. You have maybe 20 minutes to look at the lesson plan for the day, if there is one, if you can find it in the room. So I'd say the biggest thing for you guys is, if you are going to be gone, which you should be, take days that you have if you need them, that make sure you have a specified place for sub notes that are easy to read for subs. Have a binder ready to go, because you never know if you're gonna be sick. Don't keep it in a cupboard somewhere thinking that somebody's gonna find it, because I would come into a classroom with sometimes nothing. And, some would be a kindergarten classroom, some would be a high school classroom. And it was like, oh, where's the things? And the kindergarten kids would go, oh, I think they're over there. And then you'd look, and then half the day would be over. So if I could recommend something, especially as a former substitute teacher, have a plan, have a binder of just things that is just easy accessible, that they can walk in and immediately see it. So I started that, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was going to go back to school to be a special education teacher, but former mentors, Mrs. Foth and Mrs. Callahan, who I did all my student teaching and stuff under, they said, try not to go that route, because if you are going to go into special education, your chances of you going back into and getting into art is slim to none, because they really, really need special education teachers. So for you to teach, getting to teach both probably wouldn't happen. So I took their advice, which I'm really happy that I did. And then, so I did that for a year and a half, and then Mrs. Foth and my elementary teacher that was here, Mrs. Yanish, you guys would probably hear when she was still here. So she called me up and she said, I'm moving to Fargo. I'm gonna be in the Fargo School District. Apply for my job. So it didn't even open before I applied. So my application was the first one in, and I got that position. So I taught 2 years at the elementary when you guys were all little kindergarteners. You guys were my first little babies in my teaching here. So I taught 2 years of kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So I went between Washington and Jefferson. I did 2 days a week at Jefferson and 3 days a week at 3 days a week at Jefferson, 2 days a week at Washington. And then Mrs. Foth ended up retiring, so then I transferred. So I was already in this district so that I didn't have to reapply or things like that. So I just put in for a transfer. So then I transferred up to the middle school. So I taught 7th and 8th grade, and then a couple sections of Art 1. And then I worked with Mrs. Callahan. And then Mrs. Callahan said that she was done, and that then I took the high school position, so 9th through 12th, and I was doing that for a few years, and then they decided to cut the middle school position due to budget cuts. So now I teach 7 through 12. And that's really, and then I decided to really stick it to the man, to my former principal, which he is also a neighbor down the street from me, so just to clarify that. So I really, and he still lives there, so I still, from time to time, he goes, well, did you make it? And then I ended up getting my master's a couple of years ago. So now I'm a Bison and a UCSU grad. And that's where I am today.
And if you listen to all three stories, you have Schumacher, you have Stickler, you have 2 teachers for you.
Yep.
So developing relationships with the ones that care for you and the ones that push you and the ones that make you better is huge for your development now and in the future. And then when you get to be that teacher, you can be the one that people sit in a panel and go, remember Mrs. Huffstutler? Mrs. Huffstutler, she was amazing. She's the reason I am where I am, right? You have that power.
Well, and you have those people too that you go, I am never going to teach like this person. You'll have those, okay? That sometimes drives you to be better than somebody that maybe you didn't get along with. And that's the nice thing, especially at the high school, is you guys can go to different classes. The elementary is a little bit different, but you have the ability to make, if you don't make connections with one teacher, you can make connections with 5 other teachers. So that's kind of the one nice thing, especially with me teaching K through 12, is you can see those differences where you might have those kids for all year at the elementary, but the ability to kind of move around and see those different dynamics of different teachers, you can see the different styles. And that's the one thing about North Dakota schools that I think is really nice, is they give us the freedom to teach how we want to teach. It's not everybody's, here's your book, here's your curriculum, everybody has to teach this same project at April 15th of this day of this month of this year. you have the flexibility to, here's your content, here's your curriculum. You can personalize it and make it your own, which is really nice. Because there's a lot of states that are very strict in how they want you to do things, so.
Amelia, you wanna start?
Sure. What's
Okay.
the hardest part about your job?
For me, it's time management. I'm also a full-time bus driver. So we have early mornings, and then my last hour of the day is prep, which I have a half an hour to prep for 5 classes the next day, and to get everything run off that I need to, and to prepare any other notes. So for me, that's the hardest part of my day, is time management. To try to squeeze it all in and have enough energy to get it all done. So that's the concern for me.
You said the hardest, not the worst, right?
Amelia Meester.
No, I'd agree. Hardest would be, I'd have to go one step further and say work-life balance is the hardest. That's, if you're gonna be good, you gotta put the time and effort into it, but yet you still need to be there for your family, and you still need to get sleep, and you still need to also have a life yourself. So that work-life balance is probably the toughest part.
I would say for me, because I think they're a little bit different just because they're more of a core subject. For being an elective for me is I'm always constantly fighting for my subject, that it is just as important as a core subject area. So I think for me it's a little bit different that, you know, I have to make sure that I'm in News Dakota, or having art shows all the time, or being a part of the community. So really pushing my subject even harder. I feel like, and I'm not saying that you guys don't work hard, but I feel like I have to do even more just to kind of prove myself all the time. So I would say for me,
You gotta prove art all the time.
prove art all the time. That, you know, especially for North Dakota, I think it's a little bit different too, because you know, you're constantly getting questioned. You know, if you're going into for art, you know, what are you gonna do with it? Like, you know, people don't feel like there's a lot of job markets for you, but there's actually more in the art field than a lot of others. So I think it's just always kind of like proving to people that there are, you know, the things that you see around are, you know, created by artists, or buildings made by architects, that it's not just, you know, making things to put in an art gallery.
What are the pros and cons of your job?
Pros for me is seeing you guys every day, getting a new group of kids, getting to know you guys personally, your likes, your dislikes. The cons, I kind of already said that, just kind of always having to prove, and then having to not only implement your subject matter, but then you have stuff coming in from, you know, state and, you know, things from upper even, things like that, just different mandates, I would say maybe is more of the con.
No, teaching fills my cup, so that's why I'm here. That building the relationships and seeing the aha experiences, that's amazing. Say the biggest con is that, and this is with every job, that there's always bull crap. Like, there's stuff that goes on where you're like, why do I have to do that? Why am I in this meeting? Why am I like? But it doesn't matter what profession you go into, you're always going to have some of that. I mean, there's a lot of that in the military of, like, you just got to just buck up and get through it. So I mean, that's my thing, is that when there's something that doesn't make sense to me, but yet it's mandated, that, all right, whatever, dude, I'll get it done. So that's my worst part.
For me, the best part, I guess, is, again, the students, watching the growth in the students, as far as when they're able to master different concepts. And it's not always immediate. You get students that come back years after, or they're in college, or sometimes it's the students you least expect, those that you might have the most difficulty with. I had a situation where a young man came up to me and just, years later, and just thanked me for what I did. And many times you feel like you go unappreciated, but it's those moments that really stick out that I really remember and appreciate from former students. The cons, nail it on the head right here. You just learn to deal with it. Not everything is gonna go exactly the way you want. You need to be flexible. You're gonna get interrupted in the middle of your period with something that will occur, unforeseen. So don't get upset, just deal with it. And I think being in the science background, that's kind of what you do, you figure out solutions. And it's true for not just science, but other things. You figure out how to get through and how to make every minute that you can be the best educational opportunity for your students. So, but there are going to be things that come up, so deal with it, get through it.
Are there some students you don't get along with, and how do you deal with if there?
Knowing, understanding psychology, that most kids that you don't get along with, it's not you as the teacher, and you can't take it personally. It's not you as the teacher. I mean, unless you did screw up with that kid, in which you should make it right and apologize. But a lot of times it's you gotta go. They're bringing in baggage. The reason they're difficult is not because of you or your content. It's because they're bringing in baggage, and probably maybe like in chemistry, maybe the content's making it worse because they have so much other crap going on in their lives that chemistry is not a priority. And you guys know if you don't stay up to date in chemistry gets kind of tough, right? If you don't stay up to date, it's tough. So kids could fall behind, and now it becomes almost some friction. But you got to realize it's not you, and you keep helping that student. And even if they're not grateful or they roll their eyes at you, you just got to keep like believing in them and saying, hey, how are we gonna do this? I'll be here to help. Let's get through it, and just go. I don't know if I'm reaching that kid, but I'm doing my best to reach that kid, and that's all I can do. Because you're always gonna have kids that you're not gonna mesh perfectly with.
Communication is the issue. Like, you'll have new kids every year, and you don't know the backgrounds. So it takes time to learn what they can do and what they can't do. So if you can establish a connection, let them know that you're there for them and to help them, then you can get that line of communication open and hopefully defray problems that might come up down the line.
And it takes time too. You know, my first couple of years of teaching, like these guys said, I was very much kind of like, okay, we gotta have this many projects out, we gotta do this. But I mean, it takes a while to really make those connections. For some kids, it happens immediately. Some kids, it may take a couple of years, and that's okay too. And I always say, there's never a bad kid. There's always sometimes those situations that are maybe making them not have good choices, but there's never a bad kid. I mean, you just kind of gotta work through those things. And it sometimes you take it to heart. I mean, you do. We're all human, but you know, just working through those kind of things. And you know, you're not gonna know all the things about your students unless they're willing to share that. Sometimes you'll get a little bit from the counseling center, but unless you make those connections with those students, you might not know their life history. You just have to kind of just roll with those punches.
This is just for Mr. Nielsen. What's your favorite part of teaching a science? I didn't write the question.
We can open it up to Mr. Undum.
Yeah.
So in the physics, I love how I do that class differently. I've talked to you guys about how I do that class differently. So that one's a lot of problem solving on your own where I don't teach you the full amount. So I love doing that to see how you guys problem solve, because in the end, physics isn't gonna matter. What's gonna matter is, can you take new situations, apply it, and then solve problems that you've never solved before, because in life, that's what you do all the time. So I love that part of it. In chemistry, last year we didn't get the liquid nitrogen or the dry ice, which I'm really upset with, because that was my favorite one, but we didn't get all the way through it because we didn't get the dry ice, but it was the one where you guys developed your own lab. Right, so we did that last year, which I think is extremely valuable, and we're gonna get to that, we were gonna get to that point this year, and I'll make sure I order dry ice and pay for it, because it didn't work last year through levers, but that one is pretty awesome, where you guys connect everything together in one unit after we've learned all the basics. So I love that part of physics, and then in STEM, that there's some kids who are shamming a little bit, and you know what, their life's background is probably a little more difficult, and there's other kids who are kind of like doing superficial stuff like, well, I'm gonna do a tie blanket. Fine, we'll let you do a tie blanket. Have you ever done a tie blanket before? No. Oh, fine. You're doing a new experience. We'll count that as STEM. But there's some other kids that are doing some amazing things. So like I loved how Owen Ploggins created a video game. He actually figured out how to do it. Gabriel Goliath Little Dog went through a coding course that was pretty awesome. So those that they were self-driven to make themselves better, and I was just a part of that, was pretty awesome.
If I could, also being a science teacher here, I love the beauty of mathematics in everything, every subject. It ties in one way or the other. When you apply it to physics and see how things happen because of the mathematics behind. When you graph mathematical formulas and they graph out into a perfect tree, just like, how can they be connected? That's what I see the beauty, and being able to watch students make those connections and make those graphs, apply those mathematical laws and see how they actually work. I just think that that's just awesome. So I love math. Okay? Sorry for you math haters, but I just absolutely love math.
Okay, this kind of one is more just for Mr. Dunham, I think. Can you kind of talk about teaching in more of a rural school?
Oh, you
And
bet.
just kind of
Love
your
it.
experience with that?
I grew up in a Class B school out there. You're gonna be busy, that's for sure. You're gonna have several subjects out there, but I think I became used to it. I was used to working hard on a farm. So one thing that you really need to look at, I think, is what your long-range plan is. When you graduate from college, you're gonna have those
Keystone moments.
keystone moments that you're gonna have to pick from. For me, I wanted to work in a Class B school. I just knew that. I felt comfortable there. I felt comfortable being able to teach 5 classes in a day. I felt comfortable with the connections I was making with the student, not that you don't make them in larger schools. There are also drawbacks to this, in that you're gonna have bad days where you're gonna get behind. All right, and I've had them, and I think probably a lot of people have, because of the amount of coursework you need to get through and material. And the thing is, I think you have to remember is why you're doing it, why you're there. You're there for the kids, you're not there for yourself. I think too often, many people are there for themselves, and until they grow and learn that they're there for the kids, it's gonna be a whole lot easier. So, as the years go by, that comfort level increases.
And any class, rural or small, your first year is gonna suck, okay?
You're gonna be busy, you're gonna be very busy.
And you need to be on top of it and document everything and have everything saved and create a filing system, an organization system to make sure that in the second year, you already have your templates, you have everything there. And even if you didn't have time to be like, oh, to fix something that didn't work, you should have taken a note going, this worksheet didn't work. So that way, when you get back the next year and you're like, okay, I'm doing this unit in this class, and you have your unit plan there, and you can go, okay, I'm gonna do this day, yep, I'm good. Oh, that worksheet didn't work, I don't remember why it didn't work, but you can open it up and go, all right, why didn't it work? And then you can fix it. But if you don't do that, you're gonna be a first-year teacher like 7 times.
Use your support system. You have administrators, you have other educators around you. Talk to them.
Find your
See how
best-
they got through, yeah.
Find your bestie teacher.
That's right. So don't think that you're out there by yourself. You're not. You're part of a team. You're a small part of a large team. So, and you need to know that.
Or you're gonna get burnt out. And two, when you
Yep.
get to your practicums, your student teachings and things like that, if a teacher says, hey, you can make copies, go through the filing cabinets, take what you need, do it. Don't just go, oh yeah, do it, because then that's giving you a whole, like, lesson plans, everything. And don't feel like, when you're a student teaching, they're gonna make you make a 10-page plus lesson plan. I don't do a 10-page lesson plan anymore. But you know what, you'll get to the point where you could have your lesson plan on a sticky note, or, things like that, but you gotta go through that process to kind of figure out how things work and things like that. But beg, borrow, and steal. If you're having a rough week and you're feeling burnt out, don't be afraid to buy a $2 lesson on Teacher Pay Teachers, okay? It's okay, you don't have to, write the wheel. People sometimes have made the wheel, and you can adjust it and fix it to make it your own too, so if you feel like you're overwhelmed, find those supports, find those people. Otherwise, you will be burnt out and you're gonna want to leave teaching. You know, find those little bits and pieces that can help you make your job quicker, easier, more efficient. You know, from the layout of your classroom to, you know, making sure by Friday every week that you have all of your things ready to go and printed. You know, just those little kind of mechanical things that can kind of help you make your job easier. Because everybody on a Monday morning is gonna want the copy machine and, oh no, the copy machine broke. What are you gonna do? You know, so then you're basically screwed for the whole week because you don't have your things printed. You know, what are you going, you know, have that stuff ready to go so that you're not having to shove your arm in a copy machine and then, you know, trying to get the paper out, you know, things like that. Not that I've done that at all.
I started copying with one of those where you turn the
Oh.
crank and you had to push the primer button. That was
I mean, that's the nice
so-
thing with you guys too, is you have,
Yeah.
you know, get on those Facebook, you know, teacher groups, you know, they, you know, hey, does anybody have a lesson on this? I mean, the nice
Right.
thing about you guys is you have technology and you have the ability, like we have just, you know, before, we had our colleagues, we had our people in our department, and for me, I'm a department of one. There's one of me. You know, with the science department, there's, you know, they might be teaching different subjects, but they have each other. I'm solo. You know, my colleague is at the elementary. How often can we get together during our PLCs is it? And we meet 15 times. So, you know, making sure that it's okay to find other colleagues, even if they're people that are in Chicago that you've never met in your life, you know? So create those supports.
We better go really fast.
Yeah, yeah,
We'll get
it's,
there.
we're,
Yeah, you did pick a
Okay.
good group. We talk a lot.
it's okay,
Yeah.
it's okay.
What is the best advice you can give us about going into the teaching field?
Perfect question.
Good question.
If you aren't there to teach students, you are going into the wrong field. If you are there because you want to coach, or you are there because you want to have your summers off, or you are there because you love math, you're in the wrong field. You have to be there to teach students.
You know.
Yeah.
Drop the mic.
Okay, next.
Okay, this one's just for Kruger. Is it hard to maintain different students who are at different levels of art in the same class?
Yeah, I would say it is. For the last couple of years, I've had to do that. Especially, you know, you kind of train your younger kids to be a little bit more independent. I don't teach traditionally anymore, so every student is working on different things, which I think has helped. But yeah, if, you know, last year, Alex was in advanced art with 7th graders. I mean, it's hard to manage your time between, you know, those younger kids who need that extra help and basically need their hands held to those advanced kids. Yes, it is. You have to make sure that you specifically set out time just for those students. I mean, I have art ones that are 9th graders all the way to 12th graders all in the same room. I mean, it's like Little House on the Prairie. But, I mean, you make do. You do it. I mean, it's just a part of, you know, making sure that your lesson plans are all together.
Thank you guys so much. We have
Yeah.
classes
Thank
to
you.
We got
get
4 more
to.
kids to ask questions.
I
Oh,
know.
and there's the